this is what I came up with, and I really just utilized different font faces and sizes and even distorted the text in some cases to make it fit within a given area. I'm sure yours looks a bit different than what I created, and I would expect it to. The point of the last video was to learn the technique and apply it to the design that you were trying to make. Now in this video I want to show you some techniques for distorting type, and specifically a way that I can distort type or other objects to fit within a given area, like the holes that I left here in my design. Now what I want to show you, I'm going to zoom in on a piece of text here, and if you haven't set some, just go ahead and do that now. And I'm going to select this text, and I'm going to show you a few ways to distort this. So if you go to the Object menu, there's this little subcategory called Envelope Distort, which is pretty amazing. I'm going to choose Make with Warp, and you'll notice that when you do this, you're presented with the Warp Options dialog box, and I can turn my preview on, and in the Style dropdown, I can see all the different warp distortions that I can apply to my object. It doesn't have to be text, but in this case it is. And then you can kind of tweak this and adjust the bend. You can make it twist it in the horizontal direction and or in the vertical direction. So you have a lot of choices here for you to choose from. But I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. And the other way you can distort it is by going to Object, Envelope Distort, Make with Mesh. And you can basically create a grid for your mesh, and you can even turn your preview on so you can see what this looks like. And if you want to make this a little less fine or more fine, you can change the numbers here. But what this does when you click OK, if I grab my direct selection tool, I can click on the individual anchor points in here, and I can start distorting this type in various different ways. So I can really manipulate this and adjust it however I want. So that could be one technique that you might want to use to fill those holes over there. Now I'm going to undo that a few times to get back to just my text. And the method I want to show you is also an envelope distort, but it's using a slightly different technique. So what I'm going to do is go to my layers panel, and I'm going to uncheck or unlock the guitar layer. And I'm going to select the guitar body. And while holding down my Alt or Option key, I'm going to drag this square up to the text background layer. And then I'll go ahead and lock the guitar layer again. Now what that did is created a copy of the guitar body on my text background layer. And this is just a temporary copy because I need to use it to make the shapes that I'm trying to fill in for these holes. Now what I want to do is go to the Object menu and go to Path, Offset Path. And in my case, I'm going to offset this. You can turn your preview on. I'm going to offset it by about 1/4 of an inch. And you can see what it's doing is it's shifting the edge of the path by 1/4 of an inch. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now I have that new object that I created. Now, you want to pay attention here because what really happened is it made a copy. So I'm going to delete the original copy so that I only have the larger version of that shape. That looks pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is grab my rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw a rectangle in the area that I want that type to fit within. And I want you to overlap the guitar body with plenty of extra there. And I'll just change the color of this to make it easier to see. And then I'm going to create one more down here at the bottom. I want the text to fit within this area. That looks pretty good. And now using my selection tool, I'm going to select all 3 of these. I'm going to grab my shape builder tool, and I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key, and I'm going to remove this part of the guitar body, and then I'm going to remove this part of the shape that the guitar body was overlapping on both of them. And you can see that when I'm done, I'm left with these 2 shapes that are essentially filling in the gaps that I'm trying to fill. Now this is where it gets really fun, because what I'm going to do, and again, you can do this with type or you can do it with other objects. It really doesn't matter. But I'm going to select the text and this shape. Now, in order for this to work, it's important that this object is above the text in the stacking order. And because I drew that last, it's going to be. So I should be good there. But I'm going to go to the Object menu under Envelope Distort, and I'm going to choose Make with Top Object. And when I do that, it's going to manipulate that text to just fit within that area. That's pretty cool. So let's do that down here. Let's select that shape and this text. Go to Object, Envelope, Distort, Make with Top Object. Now it's important to understand that these objects are unique objects. If you go to the Layers panel and you open up your text background layer, these are unique envelope objects. And if you wanted to tweak these, you can just grab your direct selection tool, and if you click on the edge of that envelope, you can in fact distort that text to do whatever you want. So when you use this feature, if it's not quite what you're looking for, you can manipulate it, you know, and tweak it in different ways. Okay? So I'm going to undo that. I kind of like the way that it is. But the final step here is to make this text look like the distressed text of the other ones. And I can't do that with an envelope object. So I'm going to select the text object and go to Object, Expand. And I'm going to expand the object and the fill. I'm going to do that to both of these. And what we have now, if you look in here, we have kind of a group inside of a group, and then we have a bunch of individual compound paths. And as we learned in the last video, that's probably not going to work for what I'm trying to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this and choose Object Ungroup. Choose Object Ungroup again because we had two groups there. And then I'm going to go to Object Compound Path Release. And now with all of them still selected, I'll go to Object Compound Path Make. And now if you look in your Layers panel, you can see that we have just a compound path that we're working with. So I'm going to repeat that with this one, and I can just use the shortcut if I want to, but I'll just ungroup this, release the compound path, and then remake it. And now we have two compound paths in here. And so now what I can do is I can utilize some of these items I have over here. These are just kind of left over from what I created before. And I'm going to select these two objects, and I'll go to Object Clipping Mask, Make. Oh, and you can see my stacking order is switched around. So let's select this guy, and we'll send this to the back. And we'll make sure that we grab. And you can actually see here we have a little bit of a conundrum, because what I did is I grabbed this from some other text, and you can see that this ended up on its own layer. So what I'll do, I'm just going to drag this down to the text background layer where it belongs. Let's do the same thing to this, because I think that's why that problem was caused, and I'll just delete this isolation mode layer. And we'll make sure that we send this to the back. Let's try that one more time. Move this into position, and then we'll grab the text object as well as that shape, and I'll go to Object Clipping Mask Make. And now you can see that I'm clipping that to the text shape. Let's do that. Let's grab this one more time. Try to find some nice distressed pieces in there, and we'll send it to the back, and then we'll select the text and that object and go to Clipping Mask Make, and that is starting to look pretty good. So use the various envelope distortion techniques in Illustrator. You can modify objects and type in a number of creative ways and make it look exactly the way you're trying to make it look.